Hey, Wonderhussy here, hanging out on a soggy day in Arizona at a place I've been wanting to check out for a long time, but never did because, well, frankly, I was too cheap. And you can see that even though today isn't exactly ideal conditions for checking out an outdoor attraction, I decided to pony up and finally pay to look at the Meteor Crater of Interstate 40 in Arizona. That's right, if you've ever driven down Interstate 40 from Kingman to anywhere east, you've certainly driven past this thing, and they definitely advertise it all along the way. There's billboards, Meteor Crater, next exit, Meteor Crater, just 5 more miles, Meteor Crater. And it really is a sight to see. The only downside is it ain't cheap. I mean, I thought I was just being cheap all these years, and I never actually even looked into how much it actually costs to come out here. But it's $29. Now I know I am a skinflint, or I prefer to call myself frugal, but $29 to stare at a hole in the ground, I just feel like that's a little bit steep. But I guess you could say I'm turning over a new leaf. Today I decided not to be so dang cheap, pony up the 29 bucks, and finally check this place out. And is it worth it? Well, I don't know. I mean, it is a pretty impressive crater, and there is a pretty impressive gift shop and cafe and a pretty interesting kind of like little science museum talking about meteors and meteorites and all the different meteorites that have hit Earth and created craters like this one. And if the weather wasn't so dang chilly, drizzly, and even snowy, well, I might be inclined to say that this was worth every bit of that $29. And actually, I do think this crater was worth paying $29 to look at, if only because it gives me the opportunity to tell you the true story of the meteorite crater. Or I guess they call it a meteor crater. The difference, for those of you who, like me, are not scientists, a meteor is a rock that's flying through space towards the Earth. Then once it hits the Earth, it becomes a meteorite. Or maybe it becomes a meteorite once it enters the Earth's atmosphere and starts burning up. You know, you see those shooting stars, those are meteorites. They're rocks that I guess they get so hot when they enter the Earth's atmosphere that they, for the most part, vaporize. But then I guess some of them are big enough to where the whole thing doesn't vaporize in the Earth's atmosphere, and some significant chunk of it does hit the surface of the Earth and create a huge impact. Like this. From what I read online, I think this crater is 3,900 feet across, which is what, like 3/4 of a mile? And the size of the meteorite that created this, believe it or not, was only 160 feet across. Imagine that. It's like a tenth the size or less than that. Gosh, I'm really bad at math. 160 feet long object came shooting through the sky, through the atmosphere, hit the Earth, and created a 3,900 foot diameter crater. I don't care who you are. Those are some pretty impressive numbers. In fact, the only numbers more impressive are 29 times all the people that are here today and probably every day. This place must be making more money than God. And if you've ever been to the Vatican in Rome, well, you know that is a lot of money. I mean, you can see even on a nasty, rainy, snowy day like today, there's a ton of people checking out this crater. And at $29 a head, well, you might be wondering, how did somebody convince people to spend $29 a head just to come look at a giant hole in the ground? You might be wondering, was this place discovered by P.T. Barnum or somebody like that? Well, sort of. The answer is actually even more interesting, I think. Okay, so they think this crater was formed something like 50,000 years ago, way back in the Pleistocene era. This space rock came hurtling through the sky, smashed into the surface of the Earth, and created this 3,900 foot wide crater. And I guess this crater just sort of sat here peacefully through the millennia while the Native Americans settled this area and roamed the lands, free and wild, chasing the buffalo. Well, not buffalo. We're in Arizona. Javelina, or I don't even know if they have javelina up here. Anyway, you know what I mean. They were peacefully existing as hunter-gatherers until the arrival of the white man. Dun, dun, dun. That's right. Once the white man started settling the western United States, this crater was discovered. And in the late 1800s, early 1900s, there was this guy named Barringer who decided to file a mineral claim because he figured, he was smart, he'd probably had some schooling at some fancy school back east, and he figured, well, by golly, if a meteor hit this part of the earth, it's probably still buried out there, and that's made of some super valuable iron ore. Right? That iron ore was worth a pretty penny, even back then, or maybe especially back then, you know, when they were building all those railroads and putting in all them telephone wires. They needed a lot of iron ore, and so this dude very cannily figured he would file a mining claim in the center of this crater and dig out the juicy, sweet, sweet meteor. Unfortunately for him, that's not quite how this works. Okay, I guess the meteorite was supposed to be about 160 feet long when it hit the Earth. But prior to that, when it first entered the Earth's atmosphere, way, 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 way out that way, it was much bigger. And so most of it vaporized before it hit the ground at all. And then once it did hit the ground, I guess the rest of it just kind of shattered, scattered, dissipated. And I guess the desert all around this crater was scattered with little tiny bits and pieces and fragments of the original meteorite. And all of those bits, pieces, and fragments have probably been picked up by scavengers with metal detectors long ago. So unfortunately, there really wasn't anything left for this dude Barringer to mine. But he tried. I think I read online that you can actually see along the rim here areas where they dug in. I mean, they dug all over this place trying to find that sweet, sweet space iron ore. But unfortunately, even though he spent, golly, I think he spent his entire fortune. I can't remember. He made all of his money working for another mine in Arizona. And he spent pretty much his entire fortune trying to dig for this meteorite because he figured what was buried in here, if he could find it, was worth about $1 billion in 1903 dollars. And so I guess it was worth it to him to spend all his money trying to dig it out. Well, unfortunately, it didn't work out. He spent all his money, never did find the meteorite, and now I guess he was left with this mining claim. And so you kind of have to give this dude credit. He and his heirs held on to the mining claim and I guess bought the land around it as well, and decided if they couldn't make money selling iron ore, they'd make a fortune charging people to come look at a hole in the ground. And like I said, apparently it's working. I mean, he bought the land, I think, in 1903, so was that like 121 years ago? 121 years of, oh gosh, probably at least a few hundred people a day. I mean, it's right off of Interstate 40, which is a very heavily trafficked highway. Lots of people stop here. You know, it's not too far from the Grand Canyon and the Petrified Forest, and it's right off Route 66. So folks have been coming out here to check out this crater for decades. And even though it probably wasn't always $29, I'm sure it was probably only 50 cents back in the 1920s. All those years of all those different admission prices certainly have added up. And I'm sure the Barringer family is sitting real purty right now. And I'll be honest, I am a little bit salty that a natural wonder like this is privately owned and fenced off, and you gotta pay $29 just to see it. And they charge all the people $29 just to see them. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you got till it's gone? Anyway, yes, it does make me salty that I had to pay $29 just to come look in this hole in the ground. But I guess I have no one to be mad at but myself, because I'm the sucker who actually ponied up the 29 bucks to do it. And is it worth it? Well, like I said, at least it gave me an excuse to research the history of this place, and I do think that's kind of an interesting story about the guy and the mineral rights not panning out. Was that $29 worth of interesting? You be the judge. And incidentally, I did scout around on Google Maps to see if there's some dirt road, and there is a dirt road that goes out on that side of the crater. And you might actually be able to drive out there and then take a side-by-side or something up to the lip and look in it on your own? I'm not actually sure. I mean, it was raining pretty heavily when I got here, or sleeting, hailing. So the road looked real muddy and I didn't want to get bogged down, and I'll bet you anything, it's private property all the way around the lip anyway. So I just decided to come in here and pay like everyone else. Incidentally, I think there's a crashed plane in the middle of it. I'm not sure that's what there is. I know there's a plane crash wreckage in here somewhere, and I can't tell if that's it or what. I guess what happened is some pilot back in the 50s, I think 60s, was flying low, buzzed down into the crater, and then had a hard time climbing back out. In fact, wasn't able to climb back out, and the plane crashed. Fortunately, I think there was 2 guys aboard and they survived, but they weren't able to retrieve all the wreckage from the crater. And so the detritus from one man's folly still sits in the bottom of this magnificent natural wonder. This magnificent natural wonder, which has been fenced off, caged in like a wild animal. I think it's kind of interesting. I guess the United States government did try to, buy this land from the Berenger family and turn it into a national monument or a national park, but they weren't selling because they knew there's a sucker born every minute who'll pay $29 to come look at it. So why give it over to the federal government? Now that I think about it, maybe that guy that buzzed it in the airplane was just trying to get a free peek without paying the $29. I can totally see myself doing something like that. Being cheap, not wanting to pay the money, going, oh, well, we'll just hop in my friend's plane and we'll just fly real low and we'll see it for free. And then not being able to climb back out and having to pay a much higher bill for search and rescue to drag me out of there. Anyway, if you've ever been curious about this meteor crater, well, this is what it looks like. And essentially there's just a bunch of walkways and viewing platforms that you can walk around to and get different viewpoints of the crater, which all of them are essentially the same. I guess some are higher than others. I mean, you can see I was just standing on that overlook there, and then earlier I was down in that little shaded overlook a little bit farther down. And I suppose in order to get my money's worth, I should check the view from every single one of these dang platforms. This one here actually has 2 telescopes, so you can really look at the meteor. Unfortunately, I don't think it'll work through my camera. Nope. But I can tell you what I'm seeing isn't a whole lot different from what I showed you with my zoom. You know, you're basically just staring at the side of the crater, and I don't even know if that is the airplane wreckage. Oh, look, it's like there's a little astronaut down there and an American flag. Oh my God, how cute is that? I love it. I wonder why they put that down there. Oh, now I'm curious. If I look through this, will I be able to see even more detail? There's like an excavation hole or something in the middle. I wonder if they're digging for something. It's like a graded off hole. Maybe that's where that dude Berenger was digging for the iron ore. I don't know. Man, it is so cold out here right now. Unseasonably so. It's like, gosh, I think it's in the upper 30s, low 40s. I'm gonna go inside this visitors center, and I guess I'll just do a quick tour of what else you might see if you creak open your wallet and pony up the $29 to come check out this crater. Okay, the visitors center at the Meteor Crater actually isn't bad. First, they tell you a little bit about Daniel Berenger, the dude who tried to mine for the meteorite, and they go into a little bit of the history of how he tried to do it. And then there's like a CGI video rendering of what it might have looked like when the meteorite came hurtling through space, entered the Earth's atmosphere, and then smashed into the Arizona desert below, which was pretty cool. And then there's some exhibits showing other meteorites that have crashed into the Earth in the past, including one that smashed into a Chevy Malibu in New York back in 1992. And then, disconcertingly, there's a display showing other meteors that are predicted to pass close to the Earth in the near future. And they also explain how NASA used this crater to train astronauts for the Apollo moon missions. Oh man, look at this, because you can't go down inside the actual crater. They have this photo op where you can stand in front of a backdrop and pretend you're in the crater. Okay, I guess that museum was actually pretty cool. And if that's what they're spending all this admission money on, then I guess it's going to a good cause. And before I leave, there is one more viewing platform I haven't checked out yet, and it's the one way, way, way up at the top, which I guess is gonna give us the best view of all. And it'll be a good way to stretch my legs after sitting on my butt all day driving. Okay, it's real windy up here, but now we are at the highest viewing point you can get to above the mighty Meteor Crater. And I will say that now that it's stopped raining, the landscape is pretty friggin' spectacular. I mean, not just the crater itself, which is totally impressive, but look at the landscape around us. I mean, we're in the middle of this vast, high desert plain, I guess you would call it. Just kind of brown grass, low clouds, not really any hills or anything. Almost as far as the eye can see. And then this giant hole right in the middle of it. That is pretty cool. So even though everyone and their Aunt Sally is here today, because I think it's spring break or something, I guess I'm still glad I stopped by here. If only to learn the fascinating history of the guy who tried to mine for a meteor. He might not have gotten rich off of that space rock, but he figured out a way to make his money anyway. Talk about a real American hero. Okay, hold on. Before I leave this Meteor Crater tourist trap, I thought I would try taking that dirt road, which winds out into the desert. Well, I don't know where it leads, way out into the middle of nowhere, but it goes right around the edge of the Meteor Crater. I mean, that's the lip of the crater right there. And the visitor center and the gift shop and all that crap are right over there. But it's a lot more to my liking out here in the middle of the desert. There's only one problem. Old Man Behringer, or I guess I should say the heirs of Old Man Behringer, have this place locked up tighter than a you-know-what. Okay, I guess not technically locked up. There's not really a fence, but it says no trespassing, electronic monitoring in use. Now, you tell me, what kind of electronic monitoring could possibly be in use way out here in the middle of this incredibly vast landscape? I don't know, maybe they have some kind of infrared cameras mounted on the rim of the crater to keep broke-ass hippies and salty people like me from... I would just love to hike up to the edge of that crater and look in for myself. I understand why they have all this fenced off, though. I get it. They don't want a bunch of idiots like me walking up there and walking down into the crater, and next thing you know, the sides will start crumbling down, and, well, before you know it, it won't look like a crater anymore. It'll just look like a ditch, and, you know, people always have to go to the bathroom, so there'll be toilet paper, and there'll be little empty water bottles and bags of Fritos, and, well, I get it, but it does cheese me off. Just a little. You know, the fact that such an amazing natural wonder can be owned by one family, and that family can charge you $29 just to go look at it. Ugh. It's not surprising, though. I mean, there's all kinds of natural wonders that are privately owned, you know? I don't know. I can't think of any offhand, but I'm sure there's caves and geysers and plenty of hot springs are privately owned, so, you know, I guess fair enough, Behringer. You win this round. And then, too, if you think about it and flip the script, what if he had already owned the property when the meteor hit it in the first place? Okay, that didn't happen. The meteor fell 50,000 years ago. He didn't buy the land until 1903. But say he did own this huge patch of desert when one day, randomly, a meteor came flying through the sky and created this giant crater. Well, would he be expected to give his land up to the federal government or to the public good in that instance? No, that wouldn't be fair. So I guess this is just a case of finders keepers, you know? This dude was the first one to realize how cool and important this site was. And so I guess it's only fair that his heirs should continue to make money off it to this day. That being said, unfortunately, I can't award my #1 top crater prize to Arizona's Meteor Crater. No, my #1 top crater prize goes to the lunar crater of Nevada. That's right, Nevada has a lunar crater, and they also trained NASA astronauts there. But the one in Nevada has no museum, and it has no gift shop, and it's 100% free. The only downside is Nevada's lunar crater is way out in the middle of nowhere. Not right off the interstate, like the one here in Arizona. Okay, speaking of the interstate, it's freezing out here, and it's getting late, and I need to find a place to stay tonight. And I sure don't want to camp in these conditions. Unless they let me camp at the bottom of the Meteor Crater. And I don't think that's gonna happen.